Welcome back to the Green Developer channel. Today we're talking about whether you should be spending your time learning SwiftUI, Apple's new interface toolkit, or UIKit, the more established way to build UI on iOS. So let's jump right into it. Now obviously this is a video that's aimed at people who are just starting their journey learning iOS development. If you're someone with experience and already working as a developer on Mac platforms, my assumption is that you already know UIKit and you'll just slowly learn SwiftUI in the future as it becomes more and more prevalent. But if you're starting from absolutely no knowledge of iOS, is there a clear winner on which one you should be learning first? And that's a totally valid question to ask yourself, a really intelligent one even. I always suggest new developers to try to stick as much as possible to one platform or technology, or in this case toolkit, so that your effort isn't split as much and you progress much faster. The truth is we're in a weird period of transition right now between UIKit and SwiftUI where there's no definitive answer to that question, but there's definitely some big pointers that can guide your decision. I can't tell you exactly what is better, but let's try to help you by asking a couple questions that can start making you think about your decision. Number one, are you trying to find a job as an iOS developer in the near future? Whether it's coming from a different programming background or even if it would be your first time trying to find work as a software developer, if that's the case, the answer is quite easy actually. You should be learning UIKit and putting your effort into that. The reason behind it is quite simple. Even though the tech field and specifically software is rapidly evolving all the time, changes like this one are still relatively slow. This means that currently you'll see a vast majority of iOS projects in big companies being done with UIKit. There's going to be small subsections or code bases that are starting to adopt SwiftUI, but all the maintenance work that you're going to be doing will be done with UIKit. That's just because UIKit has been around for so long by now that you have a really huge backlog of work that has been done with it. And the maintenance on these projects doesn't instantly go away because SwiftUI has arrived. And adding on top of those UIKit code bases will be often a little bit easier if you just stick to adding more UIKit code. That means that for the most part, as an iOS developer right now, if not all of your work, at least a majority of it will still be done with UIKit. And SwiftUI will be kept for smaller side projects or for prototyping as it kind of comes to its own and becomes more adopted in the software industry. That's not to say that you can't get hired if you spent your time learning SwiftUI. It might even show some initiative to the right employer and be a plus for you in that way. It's just a little bit less practical of a selling point as a developer right now because there's more demand for UIKit in the actual work that you're going to be doing. Number two, are you trying to get an iOS developer job but within a slightly bigger time window? Maybe you've started a software engineering or computer science degree and you've started to gain interest in iOS development. And you're starting to slowly prepare for your career path after graduating. Whatever it might be, if you have a little bit more time ahead of you, it might be a better choice to start learning SwiftUI first. Apple is really good at pushing transitions towards the tools and technologies that they want developers to be using. So it's not a particularly risky call to say that within the next few years, SwiftUI will be the forefront of iOS. Big companies and big projects might lag behind a little bit, but that's totally usual. Smaller companies and team that works on smaller projects or contracts or startups might start moving towards SwiftUI a little bit sooner. Which means that the longer runway you're setting yourself in your journey towards working as an iOS developer, the more SwiftUI becomes an interesting option. Like I said, we're in the middle of that transition between both, so it's impossible to just give you a straight answer that will tell you whether SwiftUI is good for you or UIKit is better for you, depending on exactly how much time you have before you want to become a developer. But just as a general rule, if you're thinking about it in a longer term, SwiftUI is probably going to be a much bigger part of iOS development by that time if it takes longer before you become an iOS developer. Number three, do you just want to work on a personal project that you have an idea for? If you have no goal to work as an iOS developer in the future and just want to build the tool set that you need to build whatever personal app project you might think about, or maybe just build a prototype so you can sell the idea down the road, whatever it might be. If that's the case, my personal suggestion is that you should be learning SwiftUI first. The general consensus within iOS developers is that SwiftUI is generally a bit more fun to use. It's less verbose, which is one of the big selling points from Apple. It's faster to build projects, it's pretty straightforward to use, and in my opinion feels pretty intuitive to learn. Some cases, because it's fairly new, it might give a little bit less control over certain things compared to UIKit, which is why some developers with more UIKit experience are still on the fence about it, but nothing that should really hinder you as a more beginner developer. Alright, just one last thing before I wrap things up. I don't want this to become too long of a video. These are just guidelines. You can try a bit of both and see if there's a real clear winner on what you prefer to use and just go on with that. You can get a job either way, and honestly, as a junior developer, just showing that you learned either of those and that you are willing to learn the other one is going to be more than enough to get a job in this field. If you're building apps for yourself, you can get results with either, so just try a bit of both and see what you prefer. I didn't want to jump too much into the technical differences between one or the other, or why one might be better for some type of projects. From what I'm seeing online, most beginners that are thinking and not sure which one they should be learning first seem to be much more focused on what it's going to get them down the road. Is UIKit going to be outdated by the time they find a job, or is SwiftUI too new that it becomes kind of difficult to market themselves as iOS developers if all they know is SwiftUI? But keep in mind, as a junior developer, if that's your end goal is to find a job working in iOS, just showing that you even did your research for deciding on either and explaining that decision, and just showing that you went through the hard work of learning either toolkit is going to be, probably enough to get you a job in iOS. Just keep working hard at it and show what you've learned, and good managers and good recruiters are going to see that the actual toolkit you spent more time working on doesn't matter that much, and as long as you kind of build that interest and that will to learn either when it comes down to that on the job, is going to be more than enough to show that you're fit for that job and you can actually learn when you're presented with that task. If you're still torn and don't know what to decide, I hope these couple points helped a little bit. If it was useful, make sure to hit the like button. If you want to see more videos like this one, hit subscribe so you're notified next time I post. If you'd like to support the channel even more, you can check out my Patreon down below. Either way, I'll see you all next week, and until then, take care.